Hi everyone, welcome to the very first episode of the Participatory Pondements. It is actually a podcast episode that accompanies the virtual exhibition titled Modern Fatigue, which I've kind of designed. And today we have our very first guest on this show. We have Zheng Kang.
Hi guys, hello.
Can you share a little bit more about yourself?
Okay, so I'm John's cosplay in PPE back in school. We share like an interest in art history and philosophy. So I'm very grateful to come onto your show today to talk about art. So happy to be here.
Yeah. So I'm really grateful that Zheng Kang is willing to join us today because we know each other through PPE, right? Philosophy, Politics, Economics at NUS. And I studied art history as a minor. You take literature.
I am literature as a minor.
Yeah. So it's quite cool because we both have very different, not really different also, just differing perspectives on the world. And I studied art history and I really love art history. And one reason why I wanted to set up this podcast also is to, in a sense, make art history more easily accessible, easily understandable. And I think for you, even though you have no formal training in art history, I'm very sure you have much to share, right?
I hope so. I'll try. Great. What are we gonna talk about today?
Alright, so actually this podcast accompanies our exhibition titled The Modern Fatigue. And I think I'm going to share a little bit more about the impetus, right, of how this exhibition came about. So for me, right, actually this exhibition came about because I am a content creator, and I've been venturing into songwriting recently.
Okay.
And I realized it's quite interesting because I was talking to a lot of my friends about writing songs, right? So when you're making songs, making a mini album, like a music project, what is the underlying theme that binds my songs together, right? And I have a very hard time understanding that, because if you see many artists, like for me, I love Taylor Swift, for example. She has a very strong visual theme, a sort of conceptual theme, right, that underlies her songs and their albums. And for me, I was thinking, what exactly is it that binds my songs together? And I realized the answer comes in the idea of this sort of fatigue of trying to understanding the world around me. So my mini album project titled Worldview. So worldview comes from the word viewing the world, right? And I realized that for me it's a lot of difficulties in navigating the world that I'm in understanding the world. So the 4 songs that I released, that I'm currently going to release soon. The first song is titled Worldview, which understands how I view the world and how the world is being perceived and described to us, right? So I'm actually very concerned with the ideas of income inequality that drives society.
Okay.
I'm also very concerned with the idea of how we are constantly fixated or projecting this image of ourselves on social media, right? The need to keep feeding the algorithm, for example. So these were some concerns that I had in my song. And I have other songs on the album that talks about finding love in this era of time where even love itself, relationships are very commodified, how people want to get married just so that they can
they get a BTO.
And my final song on the album, which I've already released, is titled Procrastinate. The understanding of how students, we're so tired, we have to balance our schoolwork, balancing having a life outside also, and we tend to procrastinate, and procrastination is not inherently a good or bad thing, right? So that's something that I want to explore with my music project. So because of this need to explore, my desire to explore more, I've looked at other artists whose works speak to this whole theme, right? And that's why I make this mini exhibition to showcase the different perspectives that artists have.
Okay.
So I think my very first question to you is, what do you think about this whole idea of the modern fatigue? Do you think there is even something that is worth addressing, worth thinking about? Or is it something that is just
Okay. Well, firstly, I think we have to break it down first, right? We'll look at fatigue first, because this is a deceptively simple, but it is a surprisingly complex term. When it comes to fatigue, right, it's really about being tired, lacking the will to continue. You no longer have the energy to keep up, but the term modern fatigue implies that there's this distinct form of fatigue and burnout to our contemporary times, to the contemporary era compared to before. So I think we have to look at what distinguishes our current modern era from before. I think we could characterize the modern era to be very interconnected, very information driven, and you could say that conflict increases in this time because there's more touch points with each other, therefore more opportunities for conflict. So I would say modern fatigue is at least the way I interpret it, is bred from conflict, not just with other people, but with other things and with yourself. So yeah, I find the concept of modern fatigue really interesting, something you can really pick apart. Yeah.
That's good. It's really nice that how you bring in the idea of conflict in understanding
Right, yeah.
fatigue. Because for me, when I was thinking of the term fatigue, right, it's not just the sort of approach they talk about. I also thought about the idea of fatigue as being tired of things, like I'm so tired of like the way life is. I'm so tired of how society runs, the whole
Right,
idea
okay.
of fatigue. And it's really nice that you brought in the idea of the time frame, because I think I want to look at how, like, obviously, like throughout history, everyone has been tired in different ways, right?
Right.
But the form of exhaustion that we face nowadays feels very different, right, from the sort of exhaustion that perhaps our great-grandparents might have faced in their time in history.
Right.
Yeah. So to actually sort of frame our discussion, let me introduce a book that I really reference a lot.
Okay.
So it is titled The Burnout Society by Byung-Chul Han. Really amazing book. It's a very short read, like 60, 70 pages. And this whole book actually talks about like the sort of evolution of how society has progressed over time and what this implies and what this means about the different forms of exhaustion that we face. Right. So I think this is where your knowledge might come in. But
Okay.
this whole idea is the idea of how he addresses Foucault's idea of the disciplinary society, which maybe you can elaborate a bit more on that later.
Okay.
But he sees how, like, in a sense, Foucault's understanding of society, in a sense, implies more of a negative view, right, of how
Okay.
society is very binding, it's just constricting, right? But he realized that society nowadays is no longer the sort of binding, right? We talk about the advice of neoliberalism, right? It's not
Right.
so much the idea of binding, it's sort of like, oh, you're free to do whatever you want. But he kind of questions the freedom that we have, We are faced with, like, way too much choices, way too many things to do. It's not he call it the violence of the excess. There's just too many things for us to consider. Everyone is always working on something. Everyone's hustling. Everyone's always like improving themselves, right? So where does it stand now, in our society? Is this the sort of fatigue that we're facing? The constant need to navigate through all this
Sure. Okay.
Yeah, so you can share your thoughts.
Okay, so that's a big thing. I think first we have to talk about who Mikhail Foucault was. So Mikhail Foucault, right? Just very simply, just to give some background info. First and foremost, he's a philosopher. He's a French philosopher. From let's double check the actual era, right? Okay, so 1926 to 1984. So you can say that he did break into like the modern era, and most of his works were centered around in that time. He was primarily concerned about the way that society functions, how power is distributed, and how individuals live within this sort of society. Some of his most famous works would be Discipline and Punish and History of Sexuality, where he talks about how the facets of power, right, have changed over time and how we have changed with it. Notably, he talks about public executions that were very prominent in Europe in the early days, and even lasted for quite some time until the early 80s.
Oh yeah.
And he talks about how these public executions have transitioned into something more sinister and more innocuous surveillance. So instead of trying to punish you, trying to strike fear into you, it's trying to control people to self-regulate themselves, to internalize societal norms. I think when it comes to like the concept of like a burnt-out society, I think what the linkage that we can draw here is that everybody is so interconnected, and societal norms have been internalized within you already. So you're not equipped with like the mental capacity to self-liberate, to liberate yourself, to find yourself as an individual. You are a slave to the mechanisms of society. You're a slave to consumerism. You're a slave to surveillance, and you're constantly adjusting yourself to that, and you're taught no other way to live. So yeah, that's the way I can probably link that here. That's what Foucault would mean. Yeah.
Okay. Actually, I was quite interested to explore one of other like Foucault's ideas. I'm not sure if you're like aware of that. We know the idea of the panopticon prison.
Yeah.
I think Foucault talks about, right?
Right. Sure.
And I'm thinking actually a little bit more about is the idea of the burnout society that Byung-Chul Han proposed, right? Is it necessarily like a deviation from Foucault's understanding? Because my understanding of like the panopticon prison, the idea of surveillance, right? Of how because of the nature of surveillance. Okay, maybe you can explain a bit more. I don't really know how to verbalize that, but it's the nature of like a sort of state surveillance,
Right.
and it does become the sort of self surveillance because of like the reinforcing nature, the sort of like the illusion of inescapability from
Right,
this
yeah.
regime, for example. But my understanding of the Burnout Society, which also comes from feminist thought, right, is the idea of how we ourselves as subjects of the society, we became the ones policing others
okay.
in that
Sure,
sense.
alright.
So it's a sort of an evolution of like the sort of panopticon model that
Okay.
I don't know what your thoughts are.
Okay, I think first we have to go into explain what the panopticon is. Okay, I've written about panopticism a bit also on my own articles, but anyway, the idea of the panopticon, right, is that this giant prison and there's a central like guard tower, and you are led to believe that you're always under observation, but you can never confirm whether this is true because the warden can look at you, but you can't look at the warden. It's like a one-way thing. So what happens is that since you don't know whether you're being watched or not, you stay out of trouble. You act in a way that you believe you're being watched. If you were to make it a modern example, let's say there was a camera in your bedroom at all times, but you don't know whether it's on. But you know it, so you would act in a way that you would normally do when you're being observed. You wouldn't get yourself in trouble. When it comes to the idea of like the modernized society where we police ourselves, we internalize these norms. That's what panopticism is about. There isn't somebody forcing you to do something. It's you forcing yourself to do something. It's the belief that other people are watching you and treating you the same way that you do the same thing. Like I think very notably, like consumerism, no one is going to ever know or care whether I bought a certain like if I follow a certain trend or not. Okay. But I would still do it. I would still willingly follow the trend. Like I think what's one thing that everyone's buying right now?
Labubu dolls.
Okay, I personally, alright, sure. Okay. So let's say let's run the assumption that I do not want to be behind trends. Okay, I do not want to be perceived as someone who's backward, but at the same time, no one's gonna know whether I bought it at Labubu or I kept it at home. But I will still buy it because I'm acting on the impression that people will judge me, even though no one can actually confirm whether I bought it or not. Things like that, things like that.
It's interesting because like I recently came across this idea, right, of like how the idea of self-policing and the idea of like how especially in this modern era, like we individuals have this very interesting tendency to see that we are beyond grand historical narratives. We are above like all the things. They call it like I can't remember the exact term for it, but they call it like the ideology beyond ideology. We see ourselves as above all these kind of things, right?
Okay.
So like the reason why perhaps like Han's idea of the Burnout Society builds on the panopticon is that this self-policing goes way beyond just this, but it's the idea that we internalize the understanding that like I get to define life the way I want it to be defined, I want to do anything that I want to do. Like this world, like the world's my oyster, I can do whatever I want. Right? The whole idea that like if you can dream it, you can do it. There's sort of like overly positive sentiments that people internalize. And the thing is, because this sort of self-policing, right, we no longer see in the very negative light of like how like like you're in prison or something. It's the idea of like the possibility are endless. You can always do it.
Okay.
But at the same time, it became an ideology that is also self-reinforcing on its own.
Sure.
That this has become a sort of, I would say, maybe dominant way of thinking in this modern era.
Alright, then I think I know what you mean by modern fatigue then. I think I know how to clarify that better. In the modern era, we have a lot of, at least most of the world, not all parts of the world, many parts of the world have economic prosperity. We have access to information and resources at a degree that the world has never seen before. And it's only getting faster and faster every day. And because of that, right, of these seamless, endless opportunities, right, we are given the same belief, we internalize the same belief that everything is within our reach, because everything is within our reach. I can buy things online, I can look up things online really quickly, I can talk to people that I would never have been able to talk to from different countries and at the speeds I'll never have been able to. So of course, why shouldn't things be within my grasp, like job opportunities or projects or literally that goal-getter mindset. Everything is within my grasp. So we internalize this kind of belief, and the way that our society is structured leads us to re-internalize that social media does not help at all.
Oh yeah.
Social media does not help. You're over there. You portray your best version of yourself, and I think our age group is very dominant when it comes to this, because we have lived our lives online, and a key aspect of identities is based on how people perceive us, and with social media you put your identity out there. So that is in itself its own version of narcissism. You are putting yourself out on the public platform without the assurance or confirmation that your peers will see it, even if they like it or not. It's not an indication that they actually internalize what they've seen. But you are constantly acting under the assumption that you're being perceived. Like, I think LinkedIn influencers are a very good aspect of this. So it ties in the go-getter, career-driven mindset that can lead to people pushing themselves too far and doggedly chasing internship opportunities throughout their time. At some point, right, it no longer becomes about trying to improve your future in your career. It's about trying to get another achievement to put on your page for people to see it and to know that, oh, okay, this guy is doing well for himself, or this guy is pushing for a certain career. I think LinkedIn is actually a really good thing to look at if you want to talk about this.
LinkedIn, of course.
Yeah, we internalize this belief, or internalize this self-entrapping, imprisoning beliefs. Yeah.
And what's worse, right, is that I feel like having this sort of ideology, sort of mindset, right, is that it feels very like emancipatory on its own, right? It feels like you have liberated yourself from like a very cookie cutter model of doing things. But because you're like, oh, I get to do this, I can do that, I can do so many things at once. But the thing is, right, is because of how liberating it feels, that makes it dangerous. It makes it very welcoming for people to accept this sort of mindset. And I think even like, SPP students, I'm sure there's something that we can think of in the sort of like prisoner's dilemma. It's like you don't know what other people are doing, so you do more to compensate for like...
Right, yeah. I don't know whether my peers are working really hard to get internship opportunities right now, so I will just push myself even further to try and get something, even if they might not be doing anything at all. But you wouldn't know, right? Okay.
And the thing is, right, like as we're talking about social media, right, it's really really scary because recently, like, one of my juniors who recently followed me on Instagram, then he replied to my story because now it's like just nearing the end of the final exams period. So he's like, oh, I love how all of your year 3 students look so like nonchalant and so chill about exams. And then I was like, what, really? I was like, no, I don't think I'm chill. And then he's like, no, based on your Instagram, you look like you have a lot, you're very free, you're doing a lot of cool stuff. And I was like, you have no idea like how many mental breakdowns I've had over the past week. Like, I just don't show that on social media. Right? And it makes me very like worried because I'm someone who does content creation pretty frequently, a lot on social media. And I realized that my role as a content creator does, in a sense, shape, like, no matter how small, this sort of idea of like the go-getter mindset. And sometimes it's like, for me, I have never intended it to feel that way, but people perceive it differently from how I perceive it. Right, so this is a really real struggle, I think, not just as users of social media, but also as producers of content, right? So this is a very interesting position that we are in right now, I think. So I think, like, my question to you also is that, do you have any sort of personal experiences with this sort of like modern fatigue? Maybe yourself or what you've observed from other people?
Okay. Modern fatigue. I think we can. Let's roll it back to a few years before. Okay. Let's roll it back to a few years before. I think this is it's a uniquely Singaporean thing. Okay. Alright. So let's look at, I think, JC or O levels time, right? Okay, let's look at JC then.
That's around like 15, 16.
JC would be what?
17.
Okay. So A levels period. At that point of time, right, it was still considered cool by certain people to post how long they've been studying. I think it was around that time the trend started where they would do the time lapse, right? They do the phone time lapse and then show them studying hours on end and not leaving the table. And then they'll post like the sped up time lapse somewhere, right? And then you'll be like, wow, damn, okay. Like what will occur to you, right? It's not that wow, this guy has no life. This guy needs to like get out and see some sun. What will come to you, right? At least for me, right, was, oh dang, okay, this guy like is putting in way more hours than I am. I need to do the same lah. I need to do better.
Yeah.
And then you will go off and then you will do your thing. And then I mean I wouldn't post time lapses because I think those are kind of cringe. But it did have an effect on me that I would it would push me to study more. And spend more hours grinding for a subject. That is what can happen with the modern fatigue. You are given this information, all these people doing all these things, and you feel stressed out. And when it comes to you having to deal with your own things, right, your own world, your own life, you don't feel the energy anymore because all the energy has been sapped away by watching other people outperform you. Or at least you perceive them to outperform you. So it can get to you.
But how has this perspective changed now that you enter university, right? New phase of like education.
Okay. I mean now when it like for me, right, maybe it wouldn't, the modern fatigue has changed. It's not about like studying or whatever. It's about seeing people have fun. Seeing people have fun. Yeah.
FOMO or like
it seems that everyone is like free to do things and have fun, and I'm the one who's not. I'm the one who's struggling. So it'll be me late at night, like rushing an essay or whatever, and then I see on my phone people are out having fun partying, and I'm like, okay, so am I doing something wrong? And it just makes me not want to work anymore. I'm like, it's clear that I'm not cut off for this. If I'm grinding so hard, suffering so hard, people are having fun, then I'm not where I need to be, you know. So that is how you can. That's my experience with it. It's not great.
But would you say it is kind of like your own individual like perception of it has changed, or do you think that as a Singaporean?
I don't think my perception has changed at all. I think the nature of it has changed, but the same like internalization, the social norms remain there even when you become aware of it. I don't think my views have changed.
But I totally get it though. I feel like especially like in university in Singapore, right, like this sort of hall culture, because of like, I don't know whether you agree, but you're like ex-hall resident, right? Because of how like the hall structure sort of like rewards you if you commit a lot to like the programs and stuff. Do you think that kind of like pressurizes you into?
I think a hall is different because it's about usually the people who can commit a lot are people who like it anyway. They just want to do as many classes as possible. I mean, if you don't want to do it, then you stretch yourself thin. But we have this. I think not just Singapore, everywhere. You have this culture of like efficiency. The more you're doing, the more successful you are. But that's not true. That's not necessarily true. You don't have to be working all the time. That's how I feel about it. I can recall the number of times I see people at the beach with their laptops doing work. It's a very common sight to see. The longer you're working, the more important or the more successful you are. That kind of thing.
I think even have a whole like wider discussion of like the postmodern neoliberal subject now. It has really changed, right? Last time we see people as like the white collar workers, with briefcases going to like the central business district to work. But now I think it has changed with the nature of work, with like hybrid working environments, like what you said, like going to a beach and then bringing a laptop.
Okay, right.
I feel like I said, the way we see it hasn't really changed, but the nature of how these things have come to evolve really did.
That's an issue. Speaking of postmodernism, postmodernism is really about contrasting against like a totalizing narrative. It came out as a response to like not just fascist regimes but like Eastern European like communism, and so saying that people should be free to be individuals. You shouldn't have to follow like a large group narrative. Don't feel pressured to follow and to internalize something big just because it's there. You need to be able to embrace diversity and understand where you stand in the world on your own. I think maybe now postmodernism is more important than ever. Where we need to activate this individualism inside us, this agency,
Yeah.
to live our own lives comfortably. Yeah, I think Singapore's moving towards that too, slowly. People are starting to realize that, hey, I don't have to do what everyone else is doing,
Yeah.
because that doesn't mean it's right for me.
Yeah.
I think we're starting to see some of that now. I think it was this Mothership ad I saw.
Oh.
Yeah, it's a Mothership ad on TikTok, right?
Yeah.
About this 28, 29-year-old lady who's still not getting married.
Uh-huh.
And she's getting worried because all the people around her are posting that, you know, they're moving on in their stages of
yeah,
life,
yeah.
BTO, getting pregnant and everything.
Yeah.
And the whole point of the ad was to reiterate that you should do things your own way and not to follow a larger narrative. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Okay, that's very interesting.
Yeah.
I'm glad that people in Singapore are starting to realize that what's been happening, right?
Yeah.
That people are feeling pressure to take their life a certain way just because everyone else is doing it. Yeah.
That's true, that's true. I was also thinking of something really interesting, like maybe something that's not so much positive, but thinking of the idea of like quiet quitting also,
Right,
as a
okay.
way to respond to the very long tedious working hours, right? So like, what do you think of like quiet quitting? Like, do you think it is something that is a postmodern response to the world? Or?
Let's look at quiet quitting first. If I recall, right, it's about when you just decide to silently stop trying as hard.
Like you do enough that your salary like let's say you won't do anything
Okay,
more.
I don't think it's that big of a problem. It's something that everyone's been doing for centuries. Your
But-
first 5 years, you first join a job. You need to like you first take on a job, first take a position. You gotta work really hard to prove that you're still that you should be there. But by the time a certain period is up, right? Like people have already accepted that you're going to be there. They accept that you're already a certain part of the team. You don't have to try that hard anymore. So quiet quitting to me is pretty okay. Is it a symptom of burnout? Yeah. But I like to reframe it a bit differently. Because real burnout would be you completely drop. You can't do the job anymore. You cease to function. Quiet quitting for me, it's about managing a boundary. It's about understanding that this entire time I've pushed myself beyond what is expected of me. All I need to do is just do what is necessary. I'm not doing, even though I'm doing less, I'm not doing less than average. I've gone from exceptional to just average, which is by right should still be okay. If people expect you to constantly be performing at an exceptional level, then they're being unrealistic. so yeah, I guess that's how I see quiet quitting. It's not really burnout to me.
Okay, that's cool. I think it's nice that you mentioned that this is something that has always been happening, but I think recently something like this gets a name for itself, and people are like starting to talk a little bit more about this.
Because we become more aware of how we spend our energy, work-life boundaries, mental health, self-care, that we need to start putting a term on these active behaviors and these social phenomena, so that I guess putting a name on it gives it value.
Yeah.
Like you recognize that this is happening. It helps you better understand the way you navigate the world. Okay, yeah, I can.
Alright, nice. So now we can move on to our next section of this
Right, sure.
podcast. So let's look at some of the artworks that we'll be including in the virtual exhibition.
Okay.
So I just want to ask, right, like you've seen a list of the artworks that
Yeah, I
will
have.
be in. Are there any like artworks that really like stood out to you that you really want to like talk a little bit more?
Yes, actually, we talked about this the other day, but it's the one with the workers beside the people drinking a coffee. What's it called? Confrontation.
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 Yeah.
Yes, I don't remember the artist itself, but could you give some background info on Confrontation real quick?
Sure. Alright, so Confrontation is an artwork by an Egyptian artist, Claude Lazare, in 1974. And this actually, the thing is, right, because this is actually belonging to an exhibition that I encountered when I was in Paris at the Museum of Modern Art over there. And this is actually part of the exhibition titled Arab Presences, which actually focuses on the sort of like the Arabic population community, the North African diaspora who were working in Paris at the time. And actually these were sort of like how understanding is sort of like colonial legacies, moving beyond the colonial frame, right, where France as an empire, and also because the exhibition focuses on like modernity and modernization in this North Africa and in Paris. And one thing that really is interesting to me, right, is that the exhibition is really huge. It's massive. I think me and my friend, we spent like more than 3 hours there, and we were barely even half done with like the works there. So Confrontation, I remember looking at this artwork, but because it is one of the thousands of artworks on exhibit, so I could not capture the exhibition text itself to understand more about it. But after researching a little bit more about this work, I actually went on to find a blog post, I think like one of the sort of exhibition reviews posted in French. I went to see like the translated version of it, and it is interpreted, right, that the two workers that we see over here. Okay, I will insert the painting. Alright, so what we see over here, right, is that we see two figures, laborers, which is in very bright colors, right? We see this one all the way to the left with a bright red shirt, the other one with like a yellow shirt, and they're like sort of like drilling, doing some construction work, right? But at the same time, what we see around in the background is this like faint, like bluish hues, right, of people just chilling. It's sort of like a cafe, like it looks like a very Parisian cafe to me, I think. Like it looks like that. And based on the interpretation that the blogger has posted, right, is that it is to foreground the working class in the sort of like, I would guess, maybe in line with Marxist thought about like, looking at the efforts of the working class, right? We see that especially in the sort of French art traditions, right? We see a lot of paintings of like, the royal families, the aristocrats or whatever. We never really see like the working class being featured as prominently. And I think also this comes together with like the modern era in art, right? Modern art. How this sort of like, I would say perhaps socialist realism, which has roots in like Russia, for example, right, of like foregrounding these workers and to show that they are very important in the building and development of the society. But I think this artist in 1974, which is already pretty far away from the initial socialist realist approach to art making, right, I think what Laza wants to mention is that, and I think also like, if you look at the workers, they don't look very like French, not Parisian, right? They look like people who are like immigrant workers, for example. I think he also trying to show that, where do these people find a place in the Parisian society, right? Our image of Paris is very different from the real lived experiences, the realities that the Parisians actually go through. And I think also to show how like the other people just lazing around, just chilling, in the cafe, it does heighten also the sort of inequality that we see in society. Yeah. So this is, I guess, also my take on the blogger's take of this work. Okay. So share, what do you feel?
I think what drew me first into it was the title, right? I think for me, I always start with the title first, Confrontation. So it brings up images and of violence and resistance, or really like a direct conflict. But when you look at the artwork itself, Confrontation, right? The workers are not looking at the people in the backdrop, and the people in the backdrop similarly are not looking at them. So there is no direct interaction, no confrontation, at least an obvious confrontation initially. But then when you take a deeper look, right, there is an interaction. They are both sharing the exact same space.
Yes.
The workers are working on the ground, and the people around are just sitting around, just chilling and just sitting and lounging. Yeah. So there is an interaction. They are sharing the space, which is so strange to me because they are within the same space, but they are separated so subtly. They're not interacting with one another. They're separated by social class and the activity that they're doing. But really, it's about class, right? So I think about it this way, right? That the laboring man, right? The toils of the working man, are now brought right in the face of those in the upper classes, and they are now being confronted with it. However, the reaction to this confrontation is to ignore it. Because the way they're in position, not just in the background, but also facing away. I can agree that this is about the working class and the middle upper class, because the middle upper class are a distinct group, and they've all been colored in like a cool tone, so united as a single unit. Meanwhile, the only individuals in this case would be the working class characters here in warm tones, and not just the same warm tone, one's in red and one's in yellow, very distinct colors. So even though they're working class, they are recognized as individuals. unlike the middle upper class behind them, which are colored in a similar bluish hue.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what I thought about confrontation. I really like the technique that the techniques they've employed here to make that point here. I think it was on Burnout Society and I think some of the other works you suggested. They also, I think something that's linked with modern fatigue would be apathy.
Apathy?
Yeah, apathy, where people just cease to care. Right. It's not that they don't want it around or they openly hate it and vilify it. They just lost all interest in it. It's just something that they're neutral towards. And neutrality in this case is very dangerous because it allows status quo and negative aspects of it to persist. So I guess in terms of confrontation, okay, if we're going to talk about, okay, just remind me, confrontation is set in Paris, is it? Or is it set in...
I believe these are like African artists.
Okay, even if it's not set in Paris, right? The whole idea of class struggle is something that everyone's very familiar with. Okay, everyone's very familiar with the concept of class struggle and worker inequality and inequality in general. We're confronted by it every day. So when it comes to confrontation, right, I guess that is what is happening here. That's what I understand is happening here, where I can infer that the middle upper class have confronted with inequality every day, but they've ceased to care. What can they do about it? At least they've internalized themselves to believe that there's nothing they can do about it, so they feel apathy, they fade into the background, become this large singular unit, leaving the working class alone and out in the cold. So yeah, that's how I see it. What this confrontation is happening.
Actually, I really love your take on this because, like, looking at the title, right, confrontation, and I think like how I guess the sort of confrontation that we see here is like the sort of I won't say force fitting, but they kind of like pushing these two seemingly very distinct groups together, and also like your idea about apathy. I think if you reflect it to the broader like political sense of it, right, is that do the sort of like the governments, do they even really support, right, these sort of marginalized communities in their own society? I think there's also a sort of critique that this artist might have. So okay, these are some additional background information about him, right? The artist is that he is born in Alexandria, Egypt. He moved to Paris when he was 10 years old, following the nationalization of the Suez Canal. Right, so he took on courses. So he actually studied art in Paris itself, right? And also, he's also part of this activist cinema group. Yeah, I'm not too aware about all these kind of things, but it's also like the sort of the critique of the PCF during the Algerian War. So I think there's a sort of political undertones to do it also, because he is someone who is very engaged with the activist space, right? With the sort of state of affairs in Egypt. So it's nice to see how like some works like this, right? Which I think is also the reason why I want to bring these works in this exhibition, is that even though they don't look like an activist work, right? We don't see obvious logos and stuff, but it does mention, sort of like showcase, right, what they feel about the regime at the time, what they feel about the circumstances that they're faced with. And I think it's really nice that you introduce this as the first work that we'll be talking about in this podcast episode, to really understand, right, how fatigue also takes in the form of apathy, but also manual labor, right, the sort of physical exhaustion that comes with it also. And at the same time, right, we are not all just about like, wow, the working class, whatever. When you look at the upper like middle class, they themselves face with their own set of fatigue that is also not necessarily visible also in this painting, for example. Like, they seem to be very laid back and chill, but I'm very sure everybody are facing their own sort of fatigue, and maybe in the context towards the working class, they have apathy to them, right? So this is a very complicated understanding of fatigue, right, in many different ways. Yeah,
I get it. Yeah, alright. Yeah, it's quite interesting to see. It's not just about your energy, your motivation. It's also about the broader political aspect of it, which really ties well into the concepts of postmodernism. About how you need to activate your individuality, activate your difference to resist like a larger totalizing narrative here. Okay, yeah, I do get it.
Right. Are there any other works that you want to talk about? Maybe one or two more.
Okay, let's see. What else caught my attention? I really liked the Henrietta by Strachan, yeah. Henrietta by Strachan. So it's about it's about a black woman, right?
It's a black woman.
It's a black woman whose body, right, was taken in by science for scientific and dissected without her consent.
Yeah.
Quite really unfortunate the way that science is enacted so violently, and science has become divorced from ethics. Over the years, it's also another concern of like postmodernism, the divorcing of science and ethics, why violence is propagated. So this really drew me in because in the end, Henrietta's body and her remains, right, have been repurposed to, instead of being a tool and a subject of exploitation, right, she now becomes a grim reminder of it, calling to attention the plight of minorities and the plight of everybody really under these very damning institutions. This really drew me in because it's a person, it's a person who's become art themselves. And we are reclaiming what her body means. It used to be a subject of like examination and objectification, but now her individuality has been reclaimed in some sense, now repurposed to turn attention back to what's wrong with society these days. So that's what caught my attention.
I think I'll share a little bit more about the context behind this work also.
Sure.
So this work, right, by Tavares Strachan is actually featured in an exhibition at the Hayward Gallery in London. So I actually came across this, and he's actually from Bahama, so he's not an English artist. So it's really nice that I get to encounter his work over there.
Right.
And okay, this is like the text that came with it in the exhibition, right?
Okay.
Is that so the figure that we're talking about, right, Henrietta Lacks, is actually an African American woman whose cells were illegally harvested by white doctors during her cancer treatment. And then they were like reproduced and immortalized, right, by these scientists. And actually now that her cells became one of the most important cells that were used as samples in medical research.
Right, okay.
So it's interesting how like the whole tradition of like scientific research, right, actually stems a lot from very problematic origins, right? I think not just in this sort of like cell studies, but in terms of like genetic studies, broader sense of like
a lot of scientific development is founded on some pretty unethical practices, but history has swept it clean. Right. We ignore what has really happened back then.
And it's really cool because after reading a bit more, they said how actually these cells, which is very pivotal, right, to kickstart cell research, was eventually sort of like related to the research of the COVID vaccine also. Because of like how the initial research, it kind of branches out and everybody cites earlier research, right? So even though like her contribution to the scientific community is large, but it's involuntary. Like she never ever like openly agreed to do something like this. And I think this also represents, right, the other aspect of the modern fatigue that I talk about here is also like the fatigue of being tired of oppression, tired of exploitation. And this is one example that I talk about because it seems that I think when I think of like exploitation of the human body for medical reasons, I think of it as a very ancient way of doing things. I was thinking of like perhaps the Renaissance times, right, where they actually like sort of like drag corpses into the artist studios and artists trying to like understand anatomy. This is how Da Vinci even came about, perfecting his understanding of the human body, right? So when I think of like the sort of exploitation of the human body, I thought of the sort of Renaissance era, like many centuries ago. So it's really quite scary to me that this is also still like happening over like literally slightly over 100 years ago. This is still ongoing, right? The sort of using this as the body as a way to do self-research. And it made me question even like bigger, right? So obviously this is very problematic. It also stems from sort of perhaps even racist undertones. But do we see this sort of exploitation even in today's society? I was thinking of the idea of like perhaps even sweatshops, right? Not really exploiting the body per se, but exploiting the outputs of the body, right? So it's to also challenge our understanding of like how this modern fatigue, the idea of exploitation, how has it evolved also in modern context. So that's something that I really want to
exploitation. How has it evolved in modern context? I mean, exploitation will stay forever unless we can restructure the way that the economy functions, the way capitalism is built. It's quite horrible. The way that this exploitation continues. Do I have a way to fix it? I don't have a way to fix it. I wish I did. But yeah, it's quite frightening to see how we can do this to our fellow human beings, and it makes you wonder, when is it your turn to be exploited? Because you can feel assured that you're in like a majority group, or you're comfortable in your social status, that this sort of things will never happen to you. But what happens is a systematic destruction of those who are different and of all minorities, until eventually you become the odd one out. You identify with a group that is being excluded.
Yeah.
Then what? What then?
What then?
What then?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Actually, this made me realize even more, like thinking about how this pushing this idea of exploitation, right?
Yeah.
I was thinking how exploitation look like nowadays is how those big social media brands, they're tracking your data, right? Privacy issues.
I think exploitation is still racially charged.
Racially charged, yeah.
Unfortunately. Is it different now? Yes, correct, definitely. But it still seeks to turn anyone different into a subject of exploitation, into a subject of objectification. In the modern day, if we were to talk about like surveillance, right? Are you being exploited? Yes, definitely. Because you are not in the same position of power as those who have control over your data. So you are being seen as a product.
Yeah.
You're being exploited for your data. Facebook sells your stuff, your information. Google does the same thing too. Nothing you can do about it other than to stop using these platforms. But if it becomes so integral to your part of your life, you can't help but use it. I feel. Yeah, that's how I feel. Unfortunate. But yeah, we are going through a similar exploitation. I wouldn't be so bold to claim that we are going through the same thing in Henrietta, but we are on the right track. We are on the same track to delude yourself into thinking that this is not a similar kind of like destruction of your identity. That's a problem.
Alright, nice, thank you. Maybe you have any last work you want to talk about? Let's see.
Last word. I really like Please Say, but
that's great.
Please Say. I think you have.
We have the artwork here with us. So it's really nice that you really want to talk about this, because this was an artwork that I came across at the Venice Biennale this year. This is actually from the Seychelles Pavilion. And the thing is, I didn't even know what Seychelles was, right? So it's actually like a mini island of the main African continent. Like it belongs to the greater African continent, but it is a really, really small island state also, kind of like Singapore-ish, I feel. And it's a very, very small space. And one thing about Seychelles, right, I went to read a little bit more about the history of it, is that many of these artists are also trying to understand, right, what does it mean to be somebody Seychelles, like the identity as a nation. So it's also something that their artists are also struggling with. In particular, I'll focus more about the artists for this work. So Danielle Frickley, she actually created this work as a way to sort of combat loneliness in today's society, right? So how she does it is that she encourages people to have conversations with strangers. So I think of like conversations with strangers in today's context, they don't always seem very safe, right? I was thinking the idea of like perhaps talking to strangers on like dating apps, right? You will never know what comes from it. Really, really scary space. And this initiative is really, really amazing, because actually give me a closer look. They actually come with like instructions of how you can actually start conversations with other people. They give you conversation prompts, and if you scan the QR code over here, right? You can scan. Alright, so you scan this QR code over here. It actually leads you to like a very detailed information sheet about what are some prompts that can happen, and it's also to talk about like to make it easier for people to be vulnerable with each other, because bringing this ribbon along, you're letting people know that you're open to hold these kind of conversations, right? So I think it's a really, really beautiful initiative, and this does also sort of like how, in the wider context of this section of the exhibition, right, the demilitarization of consciousness, how does it help to counter perhaps the sort of, fast-paced, very like individualistic kind of approach that society is making us into? I don't know.
Okay, alright. In the modern era, we're able to communicate people on a greater degree than we could ever before. And that can give you its own unique form of fatigue. You can get tired of replying to somebody and you just dip and you don't talk to them, or you feel overwhelmed by text messages, which at first seems very minor, but when you think about it, right, or when you look at it, right, Everyone's felt that you don't want to reply to somebody, but they're able to reach and penetrate your social circle or your private space by messaging you, and you're forced to see it, and you have no choice but to reconcile with it, reckon with it. So you can either ignore or to, whatever. Which is a very interesting paradox, right?
Yeah.
You're more connected to people, but you're now more isolated from them. There are more ways for people to reach you, but you don't want to be reached on that many degrees.
Yeah.
So I felt that the Sash, right, like the please say, provides you a concrete, a physical way to interact with people in the mid space, in reality, away from from digital aspects of the internet, from media. I like it how it provides like a structure on how to initiate a conversation, how to carry a conversation, which seems very simple at the start, like who needs help to know how to talk to people, but we actually all do. We all need to work on social skills. It's a skill. In fact, you need to practice and get good at it, and the less time you spend outside talking to people, the worse your social skills are gonna get. So I'm really proud of this, and it really helps like deal with this like information or communication fatigue that we see.
Yeah.
And
it's nice to you mentioned that how conversations aren't as easy as you think they are.
Yeah.
Especially right, like how in today's context we don't as we're talking about mental health, right, for example. But how do we hold the space for comfortable and safe mental health discussions, right? So like actually I attended like some like trainings on like how to do peer support in mental health space, and I realized it's very difficult. And it's really interesting how the trainer said that how compassion can be trained. I mean, not necessarily in the empathy whatever, but in a way of how do you verbalize your thoughts in a way that is accommodating and you're like making it comfortable for people to open up. That is something that's really difficult. It's not always easy to do that. And it's nice that how, like you say, like having these instructions do bridge the gap a little bit. It gives you a little bit of like a head start of like, how can you actually approach these sort of conversations? Which is really, really nice initiative.
That's good to see.
Yeah. So, okay, I think maybe these are some of the key highlights that Zheng Kang has wanted to share for this mini exhibition. So, I think maybe it's a good time to start concluding this episode. So, are there any final thoughts, from today's conversations? Was there anything that really struck you? Anything that you're like...
Yeah, thanks for having me. I think what I really liked was on trying to break down what the modern fatigue really means, and what implications it has when you see what different aspects of it it has on our lives. I think I really enjoyed looking at that larger overarching theme. But thank you for having me. Yeah.
No worries. And I think I'm very grateful for Zheng Kang for coming. And I'm also in the very early stages of planning this exhibition. So it's nice that you provide me some sort of conceptual, theoretical inspirations, right, to all this. So yes, thank you for this episode, and thank you everyone for listening. So so stay tuned for the next episode. Bye.
Thank you.
I've got like different colors.
Okay. Let's start with here we go.
Okay. Use any color pen to like sign.
If I recall how to fold if I have brain. It's been a while, so it's interesting.
It can be any way, like this one is just.
It's just, do I remember anyway? That's the question. I used to love origami.
Oh really?
Yeah, that was my thing. But it's been a while.
Well, at first I wanted like to like fold like cranes, but I feel like it's so difficult. Like even I myself, I can't remember all the steps. The paper airplane seems like the more intuitive one.
I think when I was younger, I was really into Star Wars as well. So we would learn how to make Star Wars characters out of origami, which is a lot harder. It's hard. To get a distinct shape and everything. And it wasn't just any kind of origami, it was like a hand puppet as well. So the origami hand puppet, I was very into that. I think there's an origami club in school.
There is?
There it is. I saw them do like a fundraiser.
Okay.
I'm not sure fundraiser for what though.
Well, yours seems like a very complicated.
No, it's not. This is like the most basic one, and I really, it's the most basic you could possibly do. Okay. think when I was younger, there was a paper airplane competition, and we did not pass. Because it did not meet the minimum flight distance, but it looked sick. I stand by my decision, my creative decisions. Yes. Alright, I think that makes sense. Alright, there we go. Alright, this is a I don't know if it flies.
Not too bad.
Okay. Alright.
Okay. Okay. I would like you to sign. If you want to write like a few words of like something, you know, you can do it. Let me see. Maybe like on this side.
This side. Okay. Sure. What's a good quote that I can remember? Okay, I think let's see, because I do save some little quotes that call out to me every now and then. Yeah, we'll see if we can find one. Yeah, if I can find this little like poem, a short poem. If not, then I'll just do like a nice little. Okay, never mind. Keep your inner child alive and well. Alright. Come. Okay, yeah.
Nice.
Alright, there we go.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank